That's all right.
Okay.
I'm used to having meetings on these things now. There'll be people that's internet goes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Should we look at getting going?
Yeah, let's go.
Brilliant. Okay. Oh God, this thing's going to keep beeping at me, isn't it? There's no way you can turn this thing off and stop it beeping every. Right. So we'll start. First of all, welcome everybody. We've got 203 people currently in the meeting, which is fantastic. We've obviously got a fantastic week lined up. And I think quite a few people have now said that where fell Glastonbury? Here we stand. I know Andy mentioned that yesterday as well. It's testament, I think, to the staff, particularly Andy and Ted, the course, the alumni, and most of all the students that this is going ahead. And it should be an absolutely fantastic week, I think. It's a great lineup, and it's a great opportunity for everybody just to have a week of inspiration, I think, as much as anything else. There's fantastic speakers every day this week, and I would encourage everybody to try and catch as much as you possibly can, and to engage with it as much as you possibly can. And for all students to, take notes, keep a notebook, and really engage with it. There will be pearls of wisdom flowing out of the screen, I think, over this week. So it should be an absolutely fantastic week. So this morning we've got Jennie and Mike Potts, who graduated back in 2010, which seems like an awfully long time ago, but it's as though they've never been away. Mike used to work for Next Big Thing and is currently freelancing. And Jennie used to work with Turner Duckworth and is now with B&B Studios. And I'm sure between the two of them, they'll sort of talk a little bit about their journey as to where they are now. So I don't know how a round of applause works on Teams. It would be interesting to find out, but if everybody unmutes and we could crash the entire system, or I've no idea what's going to happen, but it'd be interesting to see what a round of applause is like on Teams. So let's give it a go. That was quite good. To you guys.
I feel like I've just scored a goal.
Do you up?
Let's just hope it's not disallowed now. Right, shall I kick us off?
Yes.
Okay, so this is our presentation. Jennie and I, John's given us a very nice introduction there. So a little bit about who we are. We're going to give you a bit of an overview of us, the Preston approach to how you guys learn about how to produce ideas and the value within that and the importance within that. We'll offer a little bit of advice on our journey through our design careers, and a little bit of how you can make your own mark, and then maybe a bit of industry information and a little bit about your future itself. So as I say, it's Jennie and Mike here. We studied at Preston. There's a little picture of us from 10 years ago. We graduated in 2010, as John said. We got married in 2017. And between us, we've got 20 years experience. So that's a little bit of an overview of Jennie and myself. Just speaking about myself briefly. So as I say, I'm Mike. I'm currently freelancing as a senior designer and design director at different studios now and again. We'll go into a bit more about what that is. But I also have 10 years experience working for Next Big Thing, who are a really good creative branding studio in London, where I learned my skills over many years. So that's kind of my journey to where I am now.
And I'm Jennie, obviously. So I'm currently a design director at B&B Studios, where I've been for about 4.5 years. And before that, I was at Turner Duckworth.
So that's 3 different agencies that we've worked for, 2 career paths for us both, but it's one approach which has got us to where we are today and what we're going to speak about in a little bit of detail for you.
So basically, what we're kind of going to talk through today is a little bit about our approach, and because obviously we've both had slightly different careers and we're not coming from the same agency, rather than focus on solely sort of where we work, we were like, what brings us together? And that is the Preston way. So great ideas, beautifully crafted. This was something that was obviously instilled in us when we went to Preston. It's something that we've both taken into our different careers, and obviously it's something that everyone who's speaking this week, I know everyone who's speaking this week is alumni, and I think you'll see that as you know, you go through all the speakers this week, that this approach, this ethos is instilled in everything that everybody does. So onto a little bit of work. So about that whole ideas are the key, I thought I'd start off with showing a little uni project, because obviously this is what you guys are all learning now. All the students at Preston is all about those ideas and bringing those into everything you do. So this was a little brief to do a logo for a famous person. I picked Charlie Chaplin. And this was my little exploration. So this was one of my projects that I did, I think, in like the first 3 months at uni. And it's something now that, you know, I'm still showing it today. It's the thinking is still right. It's still a good, fun idea.
Absolutely.
So that's sort of, you know, where I started. And then that same thinking is then applied to professional projects that we've done as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as Jenny says, that's a project she did in the first 3 months as she learned about what creative ideas were and what the simplicity of that is. But 8-9 years down the line, you're applying that as soon as you graduate, but you'll need to apply those building blocks of thinking to more commercial work. And an example being the Leadenhall building. The cheese grater is a project that I spent a lot of time working on in my professional career. But still injecting some of those quick creative ideas into this is key. So whether it's the cheese grater building with its really clear wedge shape, and just introducing something like how you put that into the negative space of a wine bottle on the side, so it just creates that instantaneous bit of communication. So no matter what kind of commercial work you're doing when you become professionals, injecting that bit of fun and that little bit of creative smile is really key. Things like when we gave gifts to all the really important people when we invited them to the opening ceremony, rather than give them something more corporate, we gave them all little mini cheese graters. So introducing that little bit of fun and wit and into your commercial work is the building blocks that you're learning now at Preston at the beginning of your careers.
And then another little example from me. So this is a fairly recent project actually that I did at B&B Studio. This is a raw chocolate bar that came to us. This is what it looked like on the left-hand side of your screen when they came to us. And they basically wanted to go more mainstream with it. And this is just a quick example of, this is how we always start our projects at B&B. We start with sketching, but you can sort of see on this page, you know, the way of thinking. Again, it's all about ideas. You know, does the O of the halo turn into a halo? Does the typography go into a halo? Is there a little cacao bean within a halo? Or can you create that sort of negative space out of the typography that fills the pack? So this is where we ended up. I mean, I could talk for hours into these projects, but we're just trying to, you know, reiterate the point of these ideas. So yeah, we had a really big logo, really impactful on shelf, as they wanted to go more mainstream, but also that negative space idea of the halo. Really unique and distinctive for that brand. Obviously it's in the name. And then these little touches of gold. And you can see also in the little stamp, we also used another one of the ideas that we had for another one of the roots, with that little cacao bean within that little stampy mark. And that's it on the back of pack. So you can see we kind of, these ideas flow throughout all of the different touch points of the project. Mm-hmm. And because it was called Raw Halo and it's a healthier chocolate, that sort of idea of glowing with goodness then went throughout the whole brand. So on the social media, they've got all this like really nice glowy, mindful, joyful imagery.
Mm-hmm. Similar example with a completely different brief, really, in terms of how do you take something that's as iconic as Battersea Power Station, and what is it about Battersea Power Station that is the icon? And again, for this one, it's a big commercial piece of work, but we had to give gifts to the people who were moving in. We had 4 pieces of artwork that we were going to give to people when they moved into this, and they're spending millions of pounds on flats, but what is it we can give them, and what is the vehicle that we will give them, that we will put it in so that they receive it? Putting the artwork into 4 poster tubes that were the chimney each, so just echoing that icon and just giving people something that's nice and sumptuous, but very much feels like a quick communication of the building itself, and then wrapping it in nice foil. Bit of it's background noise there, sorry. A bit of an interlocking of the power station turrets themselves. So building in those nice little key ideas within there to really layer the brand and just make it communicate really well and just really succinctly.
Another example, so this is a whiskey project based on the Isle of Orkney. So this is the view from the distillery window, which looks out onto Scapa Flow, this body of water. And Scapa Flow is a natural harbour. So it's really flat water, flat all the time, no matter what the weather, because it's protected by the surrounding land. So to create the brand for this, we took that idea of the fact that this water is always perfectly still to create this consistent horizon. And then we put the traditional Orkney oar within the A mark in the middle of the logo, which feels nice and protected, the same way that the harbour protects the boats, and it's that view out of the distillery window. And then that horizon runs round the outer and on the sticker on the bottle and on the emboss and things. And then we also did different variants of this. So what was amazing when we were there was when you looked out the window, how quickly that the colours of the sun and the sea and the sky change over time, depending on the time of day or the weather. But the consistent is always that still water. So the other variants of this, the colours of the seas and the skies and the foreground change, but you always have that consistent boat on the horizon.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, whether you're designing Scotch or skyscrapers, the way and the process of thinking is very much the same. It's good ideas, beautiful ideas, well crafted. And whether you're doing it for a uni project now and the process that you're learning now, or whether you're going further down the line and it's 10 years later into your career, that process remains the same, and the value within it very much remains the same, that you're learning to communicate ideas, that you will eventually sell those ideas. And it's the most key point in what we do, really, is that the value in the product that we make is the ideas and the communication and the rapport that we build with who we're communicating with. And you'll see that the opposite with that is communication and design that doesn't do that. The enemy within at the moment is automated design. That there's websites out there you can go on, you can click on, and you'll go through a process where you'll tell them what kind of business you're opening. Maybe you're opening a design studio called Jam Pots, and you can choose what kind of typography you might want your logo to look like, maybe a few kind of icons. What is it you're interested in? And these logo generators will generate thousands of logos for you instantly. And there's companies out there now who don't want to invest necessarily in design, who will just invest and pay 50 quid, 30 quid for a logo, and they'll get thousands of choices instantly. But what you'll see from a page here is that there's nothing here that's iconic. There's nothing here that is particularly well designed. It's neither beautiful ideas nor well crafted. They aren't associated with anything specific. They're just vague and generic. So it's important as designers that we rise above this and create visual communication and ideas that really resonate and really work for the product that we're selling and that we're trying to promote. So this is a bit of an enemy for us, but it really keeps us on our toes and shows the value in what we do and remains going forward.
Yeah, you can't automate ideas.
Can't automate ideas, not yet.
Maybe one day. So the next section, we're going to go into a little bit more of advice, really, some pearls of wisdom, as I think John mentioned earlier. Things that we've learned over the last 10 years that we apply to our everyday lives, our careers. So how you can make your own mark. So we'll go through these in a bit more detail, but questioning, learning, collaborating, what to do when you get stuck. We all get stuck. Even 10 years down the line, there's still plenty of days where I'm like, shit, I can't think of anything. So we'll talk a bit about that. Being brave, seeing opportunities in everything, becoming a user. We'll explain a bit more what we mean by that. And knowing and learning what your passions are. So the first one is about questioning. So question everything. And what we mean by this is you need to question to really understand the problem that you're trying to solve and you're trying to come up with a solution for. So this can be down to like just when you're receiving a brief, make sure you're asking lots of questions, make sure you're really getting to the bottom of what the problem is that you're trying to solve. Questioning why. So, throughout working on something, why are you doing what you're doing? Why use that colour? Why use that font? Because as designers, we have to be able to justify everything that we're doing. I think going back to that logo generator, we need to be able to explain why we're doing stuff and have good rationale for that. And then finally, questioning the status quo. So, it's designers who change the status quo, and nothing moves if people don't innovate and come up with new things. So sometimes it's right to follow the status quo. Sometimes it's not. So quick little example of another project that I have done at B&B. So this was questioning the status quo. So well and truly, this was the previous design came to us, and they do snacks, they do tortilla chips and these like knick-knack kind of things, but they're healthier versions of. But they actually taste fucking amazing, like really, really delicious. But the problem with their previous design is they've gone down the sort of, we're really healthy, we need to cue that this is healthy, and actually looks a little bit bland and boring. And these aren't, a compromise. These are really delicious snacks, and they're called Well and Truly, so they should be, well and truly something. So we really went to town then with the name. We blew it up big. We used it in fun ways, and we wanted to make this look like a product that was fun and tasty, as snacks should be, that just also happened to be healthier. Because that's how, the world's moving forward. People want to have something that tastes as good but is a bit healthier. So then we use this name as well in some playful ways. So things like the shippers, we had different words printed on the side. So when you stack them, you get well and truly cheesy, well and truly smoky, etc., etc. Does the tote bag had on it well and truly stuffed? Just play on words to play with, obviously how you feel when you've eaten a massive bag of them, because they're very Moorish. But also obviously what you do with a tote bag. And a little tuk-tuk there, well and truly loaded. So that was sort of questioning, they came to us and they didn't actually say to us, oh, we want to look less healthy. They came to us with, we want to go more mainstream. And essentially they obviously wanted to sell more bags, and we were like, well, why do you look so healthy and boring when these actually taste delicious? So that was us sort of questioning that.
Absolutely. And a good example of challenging the status quo. Learn, be a sponge. So one of the best things, like a little character here, one of the best things about being a designer is learning a lot about lots of different subjects. And that goes twofold, really. You'll get the opportunity when you're a professional to work on lots of different consumer brands or different types of products, really. So one minute you might be designing a whiskey brand, and the next minute you're doing a dentist or a jewelry company or an expressive dance company. You could be doing anything tomorrow, something different. So it's a real opportunity to learn lots of things about lots of different types of companies and products, and exciting things that other people are passionate about and you can bring into your own world. So it's important to be a sponge in that respect and to be interested in lots of different things. But also you're going to get the opportunity to actually execute lots of different things. It's not necessarily a case of designing logos and letterheads and banners and such like. As a designer, you're going to be challenged in terms of the kinds of things that you've got to create. One of the things in my career, next big thing that I had to create, we had a challenge to design a marketing suite, which is a space that people come into and learn about a product. And this product was, it was a building estate that was, we wanted to sell real estate space. And we had this mantra of life, work balanced. So it was kind of the life side and the work side of business is very much balanced. And you have this really holistic work experience. And it's close to the Grand Union Canal. So we used this as an opportunity. And we went on bargetrader.com and bought ourselves a Dutch barge and thought we'll build this marketing suite actually on a barge. And this kind of thing goes way beyond some of the things in my more comfort zone of designing maybe brochures or logos or such like. We're designing a space, it's interior design. But at the same time, the good ideas, well-crafted mantra that Preston taught us and we learned through our career was important. So we fitted out a barge space essentially, and I had to learn about barges, that you can't drill a hole in a wall in a barge because you'll sink it. A spirit level's no good on a barge. Things like ballast and bilge pumps, the way it rocks. There's so many things. How do you get electricity on a barge? So many things you have to learn about barges that I was not interested before. And then you find you've got to get interested and you get into it. So what we did was we completely renovated this barge and made it a space that people wanted to come to, that we could talk about the product itself. We covered it in astroturfs and got watering cans and a florist involved. We put a log burner inside it. These logs on the front were about 15 tons, so we had to get a crane to winch them in. So we had to learn about logistics of things like that. Sign writers were involved in order to paint the barge, so we actually spec'd how it would be painted. And then inside we split the barge in half. So we had a work side where it was a real working space. We had scale models of the development, hard hats and PPE areas where people could get changed to go to the building site. The models will be able to move to create more space and presentations could take place. And then on the other side, we astroturfed it. We put swing chairs in there, an ice cream maker, and made it really the life side and the pleasurable side of the development so that we could echo what it would be like to work and live there. So it's very much creating an experience of a space on a barge, really. And we even put a train set in there to echo the Brunel and the Great Western Railway. So it's kind of sprinkling lots of ideas in there that would make this a really exciting experience for people. But as I say, whether you're designing logos or letterheads or barges, you're going to get an opportunity to learn a lot of interesting things about lots of different subjects.
I think that's what makes being a designer super interesting. Like, one day is never the same as another. So many different things and learn about so many different things. You know, super interesting. Even sometimes when you're working on things that you probably never thought you'd be interested in barges, but by the end of it, you
thought about buying one.
So the next one is collaboration. So obviously, two heads are better than one. Always think this is an important one. You'll collaborate when you're working naturally. You have to work together. Being a designer is interesting because it's something that you can do solely, but it's always better when you do it together. So go away, think, come back, go away, think, come back. That generally seems to be the best way of working. We had to collaborate on this, didn't we?
We did.
Which was interesting.
On this presentation,
as husband and wife. But we've just popped in here our wedding invite as well, because that's obviously the only other project that we've collaborated on together.
Yep.
So obviously 2 graphic designers designing their wedding invite, bit of a nightmare, a lot of pressure. Everyone that you work with is like, what are you going to do? But because of the pressure, we actually just went for something that was a lot more sort of light-hearted, fun, felt more us, and we went for basically a bit of copy, a bit of a poem, with loads of booze puns in. So things like, we invite you to join us while we tie the knot for I do's cold brews and the occasional shot, to eat, drink and be married. Let's pop the champagne. We're getting into the spirit as she's changing her name, and so on and so on. So it was just like, how many drinks puns can we get into?
What defines us? And it was alcohol, it turns out.
But interestingly, like, collaborating on this, again, we did the same thing. We sort of went away, came up with bits of copy on our own. Then we'd sit down in the pub and write bits, and then go away again and craft it. And so it was kind of an interesting collaboration process that we managed to do together without falling out, and still got married at the end of it.
Yeah, and it shows ideas can go beyond the visual, and copywriting is an important part of being a designer as well, learning to write copy and being interested in that kind of thing. A quick one, a brief one, words of wisdom from my dad, the man who never made a mistake, never made anything, something he tells me the whole time. But it's just an important one about making a mark, really, that in order to, design is a process. You're going to go through a process, and part of that is you've got to make mistakes a lot of the time, but in doing so, you've got to put pen to paper, and you've got to try things and experiment. I've worked with students before on briefs where they're not sure what to do, so they don't do anything, and they freeze and they're paralyzed. Whereas you're better doing something, starting something, try something. It might not work, and just chip away at it until you start getting to the areas where you start really understanding it. So it's just a simple mantra, really, that you need to, in order to make a mark, you've got to put pen to paper and actually try and experiment with some things and not have a fear of failure. Yeah,
it doesn't matter if it's wrong, because it will be right eventually if you do it with enough things.
It's a process of doing it wrong until you get it right.
So kind of on that, what to do when you are in a jam. So, you know, every designer has days, has weeks, whatever, where they're struggling. It can be a hard job, and there can be days where you're like, oh God, I cannot think of anything. So from our experience, these are the things that we do when we get stuck. So first and foremost, move away from the screen. I think, you know, just staring at your screen and staring at Pinterest and staring at a blank page is never very productive. So yeah, move away from your screen. Try and give yourself some headspace. And by screen also, I think getting off your phone is also important. So not just moving away from your Mac, but moving away from all screens. Maybe have a shower. Mike's always the one for promoting
water on the cranium. It does help.
I think it's because it's one of those times of the day, and we don't actually have very many times of the day these days because we're always connected, we're always on our phones or on the computer or whatever. But when you're in the shower,
it's just you and your thoughts.
Exactly. Same with going for a walk. You know, put your phone in your pocket and just go walk. It's when your mind has time to wander that you can actually start solving problems without the pressure of having to get something down. But then getting something down is also important. So as Mike was just saying about don't be afraid to make mistakes. Just sit down, go sit on the sofa with a sketch pad and just start writing words, drawing things. Don't worry if it's wrong or right, because as you do that process, that's when you start getting somewhere by just getting stuff out of your brain. Usually the stuff that you get out first isn't right. It is usually more the obvious stuff, but then it gets the thoughts flowing, and from there you can kind of carry on.
Indeed. Ask yourself, what would Einstein do? Einstein probably didn't say, but insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And sometimes in anything in life, but in design, we do something, it doesn't work, and we keep doing the same thing. It keeps not working. You've got to analyze your process as to why things aren't working and try something different. It's important to be self-critical about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and to think about different ways of doing things, and you'll get different results. You try something different, work in a different way, get your reference or resource from different places, and you'll start finding out different things. Whereas if you stick to doing the same thing, you're not going to get a different result, and you're going to end up stuck in a jam.
This is something that you always tell yourself, don't you? But not just in design, but when he's doing anything.
DIY.
Like,
It's good for DIY. Try something different when it's not working. So it's a mantra for life, really, from Albert.
Good old Albert. Get comfortable with criticism. So this sort of leads on from what we were saying about, you know, when you get stuck, you need to try things and try things again, and not be afraid to make mistakes. And I think for me, this really helped me mentally. I can't remember who told me about it, but design is a process of elimination. And I think when you realise that, you can get a bit more comfortable with rejection, because it is an important part of design. You know, really we come up with hundreds of ideas to get that one idea at the top of the the pyramid. And I think when you're very aware and you realise that that's the process, you don't take so personally, you know, people rejecting lots of your ideas, because that is part of the process. So come up with lots of things, then lots of things can be rejected, and you will get to that sweet spot at the top of the pyramid.
Give yourself a deadline. In the design industry, we have lots of deadlines. They're very quick. In the uni, they can be a little bit slower, but it's important that you give yourself a deadline, really. Asking Andy, John, Rachel, Ted, whoever, to review the work on Thursday, perhaps. It means that you've got 3 days to get your arse in gear and get doing something. It's easy to drift when you haven't got a deadline. You can just put things off and put things off. Whereas if you give yourself intermittent, regular deadlines, you'll start doing things and you'll start making decisions about projects and thinking what's relevant and what's not. So it's important to give yourself regular deadlines so that you can have check-ins and move the project forward.
Yeah. And just a little note, remember that you always get there in the end. That's something that I always say to the junior designers when they're panicking. I'm like, it's fine. It'll all be okay in the end. And it always has been. In 10 years, there's never been
no one's died yet.
No one's totally dropped the ball. So, yeah, we always get there in the end.
Indeed.
And on that positive note, one of the other things that was always instilled in me, and I, you know, always remember, is that there's always an opportunity in everything. So sometimes you can get a bit of negativity on certain projects in studios that no one wants to work on. An example of this for me was, this was one of the first projects that I ever got through at Turner Duckworth, and it was for Waitrose Pet Food. Pet food comes into the studio. Nobody wanted to work on it. Everyone was like, oh, pet food, boring. Like, I think they'd already worked on a few pet food brands that hadn't gone particularly well. But yeah, the whole kind of pretense of this brief was we needed to do a systematic design so that people could shop. So whether their dog liked chicken or fish, they could find, you know, easily. So the whole concept was using different shoes, because obviously dogs pick up shoes, to colour code the different types of meat. But for me, like, this was great because this was, you know, nobody really wanted to work on it in the studio. It meant that I got a route through on it because a lot of people weren't that interested in the project. I got to go and do a photo shoot with loads of like really cute cats, dogs, puppies, kittens. It was super fun. Like, that dog holding the slipper in the welly was called Brian, like he was bloody ledge. It was great, and I won some awards for this project. So I think it just goes to show that, you know, some people don't see the opportunities all the time, but there is always one there.
Become a user. So I think, particularly at a time like now where we're trapped at home, and obviously the way you guys graduate and go into the industry, things like placements isn't how it has been in the past. There's a lot of people out there now who are offering resources and help to you guys, whether it's doing portfolio surgeries with them, just asking them simple questions. There's a lot of information and resource out there that you can tap into that can make things better for you and improve and ingratiate yourself into the industry. And Jen's put a couple together here of examples of useful things.
Yeah, I mean, I won't talk through all this, but yeah, I've just screen grabbed this. There's some really good stuff, like even just on Instagram at the moment, people offering their help. Happy to Help was set up by a mate of mine at B&B. And there's over 80 different designers and illustrators and all sorts now offering, you know, free help to students and graduates. So things like that, there's loads of stuff going on, particularly this year, because people do want to help you guys. So yeah, take advantage of it and actually use it.
Use the resource.
And then so the last one in this sort of advice to you is about knowing your passions and following them. So I think it's really important, and you're not necessarily expected to know this right now, but start thinking about what are you passionate about, because if you go into a career and you're designing things that you're passionate about, then you can't really go wrong because you're going to put the work in. So for me, a little bit about kind of what I'm passionate about and why I really love working at B&B is we work a lot for startups and small businesses. And what's really exciting for me about that is startups, they come into the market they're new, they're fresh, but also they have to be better than all the main brand big competitors. So they're generally more ethical, more sustainable, better products. And usually, you know, we work a lot at the forefront of trends as well. So, you know, kefir, I think, was massive last year. We have all these sort of interesting food and drinks trends, but also sort of societal trends that we see happening because we're working at the people that are coming in at the bottom and feeding those trends. So for me, super exciting, and I really like doing design that I feel like is making change. We're designing for people, you know, that are trying to do something better, trying to do something different, and for me that's really exciting, because I do believe that, you know, designers can change the world, one step at a time.
Indeed. I mean, equally, some of the things that have got me excited and passions over the years has started with things like simplifying the complex in terms of huge amounts of information and how you make that kind of thing digestible and easy to understand. I'm a bit of a stato myself, so I enjoy making making complex things simple, whether that's large amounts of information or things like building apps or digital aspects of that, making information digestible and answering questions that people might have. Equally, things like the unexpected. Over time, I've had the opportunity to do some interesting projects with, say, things like building master suites on barge or working in skyscrapers and such like. And I learned over time that opportunity to do a bit of the unexpected or things you do outside of your comfort zone that you didn't think you would be able to do or wasn't what a graphic designer does do. Yeah. I think that opportunity to do those things brought a passion from me that you can achieve lots of different things in this career. If you just think a little bit differently. And even now in my career, doing freelance, so actually having the opportunity to be independent and flexible with who I work with, my time, means that I've got a lot of independence, really, which I enjoy. It's a chance to work with lots of different people, collaborate with different people, and it's a new opportunity and chapter for my own life, which is exciting. One opportunity I was going to discuss about the simplicity of complex information was a project that I did at uni with Andy, John and Rachel, which was combining the Rolling Stone 500 greatest songs and albums into a digestible piece of information. A huge amount of information, but how do people digest it and how can we understand it better? So taking all that huge amount of information of the 500 greatest albums of all time, and how can I make that digestible and ask a poignant question about these albums. And one of the questions that I asked was, when was the golden era of music, the 60s, 70s, 80s, and actually looked at plotting all this information along the line to create a bit of a sound bar and a sound wave. I did the same with songs, and what is the ideal length of song, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and actually plotting all them along a graph and creating a sound wave out of that one too. And asking an interesting and poignant question about how long is a great song, or when was the golden age of music, and creating a series of posters that are about 2 meters wide that could go on the wall that hopefully engage and draw people in. And then they can go from something that's pretty to actually learning something interesting from a complex piece of information. But essentially, this was a bit of a passion of mine, the organization of data, and actually bringing that into my degree made it that it didn't feel like I was just doing something for the sake of it, but doing something I was really interested in.
So this sort of leads us into our last few slides, and we just wanted to sort of leave on a positive note. We realised that this year and last year are really difficult years to graduate. We ourselves actually graduated in the last recession. But there is still a lot of opportunity out there. You know, the UK economy makes a lot of money for the country. The creative economy makes a lot of money for the country, and it's growing. So the creative industries, you know, are a good place to be in terms of the overall economy. We've put a little slide in about just sort of how much a designer can earn, because I know when I was a student I had no clue like whether this was even a good career, and sometimes you'd go on placement and people would be like, oh yeah, like if you want to be a designer you're doing the wrong job, there's not much money in it, which I don't think is true. And this is just a snapshot from Major Players salary survey, last year. So just a sort of rough estimate of what you would expect to earn from a junior designer up to a creative director. I mean, there are people that earn more, like beyond a creative director.
They're just averages.
Some people go up to earning hundreds of thousands of pounds, but in basic terms, junior designers generally now starting about 21. And then, this is just sort of shows approximately what you might earn.
It's answering a question,
in the next few years.
Answers a question that we were interested in as students as to what's the potential within it. And those kind of give a rough idea of, depending on how you progress in the industry, what kind of money you may be expected to earn, which is useful to know when you're taking a career in something. The figures at the bottom, the per day ones, are if you became a freelancer, what you might expect to charge per day, roughly around the areas. But I think it's important to say, as a freelancer, that working within an agency first is the best way, is the only way to start. It's the best way. You need to learn your apprenticeship, and you've got to take the time to learn from people who know what they're doing. Do that for 3, 5, 10 years. I mean, if I hadn't done the 10 years that I did before becoming a freelancer, then I'd probably have been a bit lost and couldn't expect to have to be charging a reasonable rate per day.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got to put the time in and learn your trade from good people, good agencies, and then in time you may decide to progress within an agency, or you might take a bit of time out for freelance.
Yeah, and I mean that's why starting salaries in design aren't hugely high, because it's really, you have to see it as an apprenticeship. I think your first 3-ish years, and then after that things start.
Yeah, they start moving along.
And then also just another note to say, back to those building blocks that you learn at Preston, with, learning how to come up with ideas. There's so many careers that you can go into. I mean, we obviously both went into agencies as graphic designers, but there are many, many more things you can do either within agencies. If you don't end up want to do design, you want to go into account management or strategy, you can become an illustrator or a typographer, so on and so on and so on. But, as I said about the creative industry, there's a plethora of careers, really good careers that you can have. And you're in the right place to be learning those sort of initial building blocks to go on and do whatever you want, really.
Absolutely.
So just to reiterate what I just said there, over the years, everyone in Preston's been taught the same thing: great ideas, beautifully crafted. And with this approach, a good attitude and enthusiasm, there's so much potential for great careers.
There is.
And as Alan Fletcher famously said, I've nothing against Preston, but shouldn't the best course in the country be in its capital city? So there we go. You're all in the best place.
Demonstrates you're in the right place. You've made a right choice in studying at Preston, and it's all ahead of you.
Yeah. And then we just put this in at the end. Obviously, we're the first of many speakers this week. But to reiterate, everyone's been to Preston, everyone's been taught the same way. But I mean, you can already see there's plenty of different people speaking this week that all have different careers. And yeah, I'd give them a listen. I'm looking forward to seeing what everyone else says.
There we have it. That's Jane. I'm out. Jam out.
You two thought of getting your own TV show, you'd be fantastic.
Awesome.
Don't tell him that.
Send this into the BBC.
I'd tune in, it'd be great.
Yeah. It meant a lot
I think we're a bit more Channel 5, maybe.
That was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Good, thank you.
We can throw the floor open for a few questions if anybody has any questions. I don't know how we know whether anybody has any questions.
You can write in the chat, can you? I don't know.
Or you can raise your hand.
Raise your hand.
There's a little hand thing.
Yeah.
Oh, there's definitely one. Yes.
Oh, they're all going now.
Oh yeah. God.
Right, settle yourselves in, guys. You're here for a while. Well, we'll start at the top. So, Alice.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, thanks so much. That was really amazing. I wanted to know, how do you keep up to date with what the consumers want, and how do you follow those trends?
Yeah, so we at B&B, our strategy team are super on it, and they go to what's it called, the futures thing.
Is it what, a conference?
Yeah, they do go to like futures conferences and stuff where they actually predict future trends, which is super interesting. And then they come back and kind of report to us. That's super interesting. But generally, just being aware of what's out there. I think because we work on so many startups and we are constantly doing it, we just have that awareness anyway. Because like we said, when you start a new project, research is so important, understanding the sector and what people want. But times are changing quicker than ever these days. You know, with this sort of digital age, trends and things come and go a lot quicker, I would say, than they did even when I graduated 10 years ago. So it is important to be on it, I think, and understanding your audience and what they want. Because if you're designing for, I don't know, people your age, they're going to want something and they're going to want it to be gave to them in a slightly different way than if you were designing for us, maybe.
Yeah. I think it's also important to get out of design a little bit in terms of like, you'll find it not just yourselves, but in the industry, like people will be able to tell you the creative director of Saatchi and Saatchi, but they won't be able to tell you the creative director of the National Theatre. It's things like trends are built through different cultures, not just in design culture. So it's a case of being interested in lots of different things, taking an interest in things elsewhere, and you'll get an idea of where trends are going. You think about who are the trendiest people you know, who are the ones who are the coolest people you know, and they're the ones who tend to be interested in certain things that are quite on the forefront of this. So if you ingratiate yourself in that culture of creative and interesting culture, going to museums, galleries, seeing interesting things, new television programs, that discovering new things. If you have a passion for it, then you will start to understand how trends work. And because you'll see people a few years down the line talking about cool stuff that you saw ages ago.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good answer. Eleanor.
Yeah, hi. Thank you again for the talk. It was sorry, I realize you can't see me. Chef's kiss. Nice. I just wanted to ask, like, how do you get over, like, if you get given a project and you're really not interested in it, like, how do you kind of, like, generate an interest in it?
How do you force it a bit? If I'm going to answer that one, there is going to be things that you do as a commercial designer that you're less interested in. It's just a fact of life that you're going to be less interested in certain things. But you've kind of you've got to dive into a project a little bit to understand what it is that a client's trying to get passionate about and what it is they love about it. What is it that's unique about this product that they're trying to sell? And if you can gain a little bit of their enthusiasm for it and get a bit of an understanding of what it is that they want to promote, what it is they love about it, what's its USP, then at least you can, from a practical point of view, maybe not a passion point of view, but from a practical point of view, you can understand it, and then you can push those key selling points and come up with something interesting. Design's a process, so you can use that process, even if you're not hugely passionate about something, to still come up with interesting ideas.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, you know, I talked a bit about seeing the opportunity and everything, and I think, you know, with that pet food project, like, I wasn't passionate about pet food.
No,
still not. But there is, you know, just because the product you're selling is not very interesting, it doesn't mean the solution doesn't have to be, I think.
Yeah.
Grand, thank you.
John, Mr. Irwin.
You all right, guys? Yeah, just a couple of questions. Firstly, Mike, what was the actual budget of the barge project? And I've never heard the word barge so many times. And also, when kind of working on a project, it's probably more for Jennie this, because working as a studio. How many people do you have actually working on a project? And are you solely responsible for the artwork, or do you have a group of people working on it?
Well, in terms of the barge, we obviously had a set budget from the client I think it was about between 180 and 250k to do it, including buying it and all those kind of things, which seems like a huge amount of money until you realise we had a spreadsheet that was enormously long of all the individual things that you've got to buy with that. Everybody's got to get paid in there, and you're building 20% contingency and all that. So we worked with an interior design stylist, and he helped spec some of the things. We had an account manager on it. So we all understood what we were trying to achieve, and there's different professionals involved in the process. It's not just one person designing and building a barge. It's a huge team that goes into it. And it was a reasonable budget to do it. The client wanted to do something really interesting. The brief was, we want something that agents who are going to use this are going to find it really exciting. They can talk to others and boast about how good it is. So the brief was good and the budget was reasonable on it. But at the end of it, we got a great product out of it. But it's a long process of 12 to 18 months to build and produce this kind of thing. So it takes time.
Yeah. And then your other question was a bit about like how the studio sort of works, wasn't it? And like how we work together. So at B&B we have, well, and it was the same at Next Big Thing, same at TD, pretty much. Generally have like project managers who run the projects in terms of liaising with the client, running the budgets, day-to-day sort of, organisation, scheduling the designer's time and stuff. Then we have a team of designers. Generally on a project, we'll have, at B&B, we have 2 or 3 of us on each project. And then we have strategy team, we have 2 strategists. So the strategy generally come up with the brief and they come up with the strategic direction that the brand should go in. So if they decide it should all be about, I don't know, sustainability or whatever, they'll present that to the client and sign off the brief, and then that's the brief that we then work to as designers. And they do creative briefs. So with Raw Halo, the creative essence was glowing with goodness. So we had that as a starting point. So then, the 2 or 3 designers will take it on. We usually present 3 different concepts. The client will pick one of them, and then it's usually whoever's route it was that the client picked will carry on the project, usually on their own. Maybe with just, if they're like more junior, they'll have someone overseeing them. And then we have artwork as well. So we have a production department, and they basically, once the design's been developed and the client signed it off, they set it up for print, which is super important in packaging, particularly because, plethora of stuff were getting printed and they all have to go to factories, and there's lots of complications in terms of numbers of colours you can use and all sorts of technical stuff. But we just design what we think we should design, and they sort it out.
They say no.
They say you can't print that. And we're like, well, come up with a way we can.
It's part of the problem. It's part of being a designer, though, is working around these limitations.
Yeah. But yeah, they're great, and they'll set it all up for print. So that's like in a nutshell how it works. The different agencies might have different balances, might have, like you guys at Next Big Thing, you didn't have production, did you? So you used to set up stuff for print yourselves as designers. So that's a skill that you learned that I've
learned to artwork,
needed to. So
we occasionally work with specialists, but a lot of the process we learned ourselves from all the way through, from birth through to creation. So depends where you work, really.
Yeah.
Great. So I've just gone on to the chat. There's a few questions on the chat. What was the main thing you learned while doing your degree?
The main thing, it was so long ago.
It was, wasn't it? Everything was in black and white those days.
Well, I think it was that ideas are key. I mean, it's something that we've obviously taken into our whole career. So that in terms of...
you don't necessarily learn that while you're there as much. It just becomes more drummed in the more you go down, that why you as lecturers teach us to be a certain way, to learn a certain way, those 1 week briefs where it's about a quick idea, those kind of things. It seemed like madness when we had our first year, and it's like, why are we doing so many of these weird briefs? But you start to get it.
Yeah, you don't really realise what you're learning, until really when you look at it in hindsight and you're like, oh yeah, that's why, like, you did it all like that. The other big thing for me, and I'm sure Michael will agree, was the placement year. I think we didn't actually talk in this presentation about our placement year, but that was literally invaluable. Like, I I never thought I'd want to live in London, to be honest. But I was like, oh, for my placement year, I'll go down there for you know, a bit and just experience it, because it'd be an interesting experience. By the end of the year, I was like, cannot wait to get back. This is where I want to live. And obviously 10 years, well, 11 years later, we're still here. So, I mean, that's obviously just the sort of, but I would never have thought that this was where I would end up. And the amount of stuff you learn during that year in terms of, you know, how studios work, what even the job is, because I think when you're at uni, like, you don't really understand what the job is until you actually go and do it and work with other people. Super exciting. Also helps you sort of, I mean, I did 8 different placements that year at lots of different agencies, and by the end of that year, I'd kind of made my mind up that I wanted to go into branding and packaging, because the agencies, branding and packaging agencies I worked at, that was the type of work that I enjoyed the most. Whereas had I not done that year, I wouldn't have known that. Yeah, it was the amount of stuff I learned that year. I feel like in some ways you learn more that year than you do in the years you're at uni. Just because you're obviously on the job, so you have to.
It's very fast paced.
Andy, good question.
You're on mute.
Still on mute. There you go.
No, I was just saying there's some questions in the chat bar, but one of the things you did say was that somebody once said it to me, that you never actually, when you're learning something, you never realise you're learning it at the time.
No.
It's only afterwards that you realise. So when you actually are truly learning something, it's not like, oh, I'm learning a lot today, you know, whatever. You're just doing it, but on reflection, you realise you've learnt it. You know what I mean? It's after the event. But no, the other thing was just some questions in the chat bar about what it's like being a northerner going down to London, which you've sort of maybe mentioned a bit, really, haven't you? You sort of talked about that. Networking, but how do you network? How important is networking? How do you start?
Yeah, super important. But that's an excellent thing about being a Preston student. And I know Andy, like, when he gets you interviews, obviously you come down for your placement year, you go to lots of interviews, you hopefully get some placements off the back of that. But I think when I came down, I only had 2 placements, and the rest I got while I was down here, because once you're down here, you know, if you're good, obviously, everyone will be like, everybody knows each other basically in the design industry. Like, obviously we're married, but we work in different places. So we've got friends like in different agencies, like everybody's, because they've all come from certain unis generally, everybody's like partners or friends, or everybody knows each other. Everyone's linked somehow. So if you go on placement in one place and you're good, and you're like, oh, I need to fill up the rest of my year, you'll be given like loads of emails. And then next minute, you know, you'll be sorted for the year. So,
I mean, that builds all the way through your career. You build more and more contacts and people you know. And then if you do something like go freelance, like I'm doing, actually utilising those contacts rather than sending cold call emails to people, actually getting in touch with people you know and saying, here's my work. Have you got any work I can help you with over the next few weeks? It's invaluable throughout your career. Knowing all, I mean, you can never know enough people, really, whether you're working in an agency or as a freelancer, to know lots of different people who can help you achieve lots of things, and you can help them. It's a network it's a small network. Oh, well, it's actually a big one, but it's tight knit. There's lots of people who know each other. And
that's why it's important to be nice to people.
And be nice.
And never slag anyone off, because you just never know. It might be like their husband or something.
Careful.
I think another thing as well is designers hang out with other designers. Birds of a feather flock together. Obviously, you know, whether it's socially going for a beer together after work, or going to galleries or events, you'll keep bumping into people.
Oh, totally. And there's still people now that, like, I obviously met on my placement year, like, and I only worked there for like 3 weeks or whatever. But I'll see them at like D&AD or whatever, and they'll come and say hello. Like, you know, people like Jack Renwick, I only worked for her at the Partners for like a few weeks, and then every time I see her, we still have a good chat. So, you know, it's quite amazing actually. If you're nice to people, you get on well, you set yourself up then.
Yeah, exactly.
A few more questions, Alia.
Hi, my question is, was the jump between university and industry a big jump, and was it a difficult transition to make?
I think, well, it partly depends really if you do placement or not. Well, I mean, one way or another, you're going to be probably doing placement after your second year or after your final year. So you're going to do it at one point or another. It is, I think, just learning the pace of it and the speed of it, really, that it works very quickly. And just understanding your place in the machine, really, that in the early years, I mean, not even the early days, it takes years to learn your apprenticeship before you understand how the design process works, and often to become valuable to a design team. So it's important to know kind of your position within that, and to learn as much as you can, to work as hard as you can, and set yourself a really good tone for your early years in terms of your work ethic, in terms of the things that you soak in as stimulation, and help you create your ideas. I think those early years are about you formulating what kind of designer you're going to become and what kind of work ethic you're going to have. And you'll carry that forward from years 4, 5, 6, 7 onwards. You'll carry that ethos forward. So I think it's a good opportunity and a springboard once you go in to just show that you're keen, you're excited, you want to learn. Leave the arrogance at the door and all that kind of thing, and just learn from people. You're going to be working with some really exciting people. And take that forward with a positive attitude, and you'll do really well.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to remember when you go in, the most important thing is to be enthusiastic and willing to help. You are not expected to know everything, and you're not expected to get things right. So as long as you're trying and you're being enthusiastic, you'll do really well.
Yeah. You need to apply the learning that you've got from Preston in terms of the beautiful ideas, well crafted. As long as you're coming up with ideas, that's what you're being brought in as placement to do, to learn and to show a little bit of what you can do, and then design team can help you to flourish through that. But not much is expected of you in the early years other than enthusiasm and coming up with some interesting ideas.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries.
What made you realise graphic design was the profession for you? That you wanted to study. It's in the chat bar, Kalisha.
Gosh, well, I know my answer. At A level, I studied maths, law, and graphic design. Nerd. Yeah. I started to realise maths was very hard, and law was very hard. And graphic design is hard, but it's a different kind of. That was the one that I was doing the best at out of the three. So I obviously, out of the three, just naturally had a bit more passion for it at the time, and that's why I pushed myself in that direction. And my tutor, when I did foundation course, pushed me towards Preston. She knew Andy. She either studied with Andy or knew him well. But she said, go to Preston because it's one of the best unis in the country. It's in the northwest, and you'll learn a design ethos that'll see you well in the industry. So it's kind of, sometimes becoming a designer, my journey was that it was out of the three spread of things I was kind of interested in, this was the one that I seemed to be the best at, or I could achieve something at. So that's why I headed in this direction.
Yeah, I think similar to me, to be honest. Like, I mean, sometimes you hear designers be like, oh, I was always passionate about it. But similar to me, like, I was like quite good at a lot of things, but like didn't really excel in one thing. So I just kept doing the things that I enjoyed the most in terms of like what subjects I'd pick, and then sort of developed a bit of a passion for graphic design. Obviously went to uni, and then it just kind of kept going. I just kept doing the things that I enjoyed the most. But I do remember one of my mum's friends, I remember my mum telling me her daughter had become a graphic designer and was working for Nestle designing chocolate bars. And I think I was quite young at that point. I remember thinking, what a dream job, like designing chocolate bars every day. And I just remember thinking, that's what I want to do.
And you did it.
And that's what I bloody did.
Yeah. It's mad, isn't it? I've just noticed Suzanne Atkins, who I mentioned a minute ago, was that tutor at Oldham College and knows you. She's got her hand up. Like, hi, Sue.
Come and join us, Suzanne.
Hi, hello, that is the, oh, hang on a minute. Feedback. Hi, it's because both me and Ben are watching in the same room. There you go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Loud and clear.
I did just raise my hand because you said that, and I just wanted to say hello. Nice.
Hi, Sue, how are you doing?
Okay, how are you? Well, no, you're very well.
Hero.
I'll go now. Let you get on to a question. I'll catch up with you sometime.
Okay, we've got time for a couple more questions. Sinead.
Hello.
Hello.
Who's been your biggest inspiration in the industry?
Me.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
I think there's a few probably inspirations that you probably look at. I think from just a working a direct point of view, probably my old boss Glenn, in terms of somebody. He was the owner and creative director in Next Big Thing, and having somebody who inspires you every day, who you want to work for and you want to do good work for, is really important in your career and the place that you choose to work and start your work. You want to work for somebody who inspires you and excites you. And Glenn always did that for me for a long time. It was like, I knew I had to impress him with the work that I did, but he was also really good at nurturing the kind of work that NBT did, and he'd push you in the right direction, and he'd put you on the right projects. Like, he took me to New York after working for 6 months at NBT because it was my work that had gone forward. He was like, you're a junior designer, fine, but you're coming and shooting it with us because you've done it. That kind of thing, like working with somebody or for somebody like that, you need to make sure you choose early on working at different places that you're working with people and for people who are going to inspire you and going to push you in the right direction. So I think in terms of inspiring you directly, it's that kind of thing. But also indirectly, Jen's right. Jen does really inspire me because she's worked but she does. She's worked for TD and she's worked for B&B, which are both really highly regarded studios. And it keeps me on my A game that, like, from an ego point of view, I don't want to be the second best designer in the relationship. So I see what Jen's doing in her company, and like she's winning awards. It's like, well, I need to win some awards now. I need to come home and tell her what I've won, and that kind of fire under your ass can help in terms of inspiration. And I have a huge amount of respect for Jen, but we also have a healthy competition as well.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's very similar to Mike. Like, I think some of my biggest inspirations have been the people that I've worked for or work with. Bruce Duckworth of Turner Duckworth, you know, when I started working there, he set this agency up with David Turner. And, you know, I mean, they've sold it on now. They're still involved, but I mean, they sold it for millions and millions of pounds. Like, I mean, that's inspirational from a kind of career and making a lot of money point of view, but he was very inspirational to work for as well from a creative point of view. Instilled a lot in me, learned a lot from him. But again, not just from him, but from everybody else that I've worked for. I mean, even now to this day, like the other designers that I work with at B&B, everyone's really good. Everyone's got, you know, their own strengths, and there's people, you know, junior designers that I can still learn a lot from now. And, you know, sometimes you're like, oh shit, I need to up my game. They're doing really well. They've come up with some great ideas. So I think inspiration doesn't always have to be the people right at the top. It can come from like your peers and people less experienced than you as well.
You kind of want to be a small fish in a big pond. The bigger the fish you start becoming, the less you learn. You're not pushing yourself. So it's sometimes time to change ponds and go somewhere else where you'll keep growing. So keep putting yourself in places where when you're starting to plateau a bit, how can you push yourself further and drive yourself further?
Yeah.
Good answer.
Oh, John's on mute.
Oh, God, I keep forgetting about that. A couple more. There's just two more questions, I think. Finza.
Hi. Which brief would you say you struggled the most with, and why?
They're always, every time I get a brief, I'm like, how the fuck am I going to come up with something for this? No, some of them are more easier than others. I think the easier briefs tend to be when you've got to communicate something quite simple. And like, I've actually just been working on a gardening website. I mean, there's no good gardening websites out there. So it felt like quite an easy one, because with gardening, there's a lot of visual language. So there's a lot to go on. But also, there's no other good gardening websites out there. So there's not a lot of competition, which makes it easier. I think the hardest ones for me are when you're working on something that's been done to death. Like, you know,
Yeah.
at B&B, we've worked on a lot of healthy snacks, and every time we would joke, but sometimes we'd be like, another healthy snack brand. How are we going to come up with another completely different concept that's not like all the other healthy snack brands that are already out there, or like any of the ones that were already done? So I think for me, that's when it gets the hardest, when you've done so many of them that you're like, how am I going to come up with another new thing?
Yeah. I think I remember one project, next big thing, it was about 4 years ago. We were doing a development called Broadgate. And I remember I was working just on a simple presentation for it. And up until that point in my career, I managed to get over most of the hurdles with a bit of hard work. But this, I was just having a bit of a block, and I nearly had a breakdown on it because the client was very difficult. Like they weren't liking it. I couldn't get it along. And I remember Glenn was like, "Mate, I can see you struggling on this project." And at that point, I was like, I think this project might beat me. But sometimes you just you find a bit more of yourself, really, because you don't want to be beaten. I want my record to carry on, that I can beat the project. So you dig a bit deeper, you seek a bit of advice from the people around you, and you just got to keep going. Like, really, you've got to have a little bit of pride and ego that you're going to beat the project, even if it's beating you up. And you'll get that in your final year, because your final year projects give you a good hammering and a good beating before you finally get on top.
I think that's the thing, uni does set you up well for it, because I mean, you'll all be experiencing when you first start on a project, you quite often get stuck, but that's just what happens. Like, there will be times where you get stuck, but you always get there in the end.
Just got to dig deep.
Okay. Did you manage to beat that project?
I think we managed to beat it enough to say it was a decent. I'd say so. We got there in the end, I think. Some projects are just more difficult than others, and it's not necessarily because they're the most creative or interesting projects, but there's different challenges you face, different clients, different things that they want from it. They might be having a difficult time in their work, so you've got to understand that. So you've just got to keep going, and you will beat. If you keep going, you will beat it. And it's all right to get like frustrated with it and that. As long as you seek advice from the people who above you who've seen it all before, they'll help you through it, and you'll make it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
There is one more question from the floor, which is Mohammed.
Hiya.
Hello.
Hi.
If you were to hire someone to your design team, what would be the qualities you would look for in them?
Enthusiasm for me is like the number one. I usually get the placements in at B&B, and I did at TD as well. And for me, the most frustrating thing is if you get someone in who just seems like they don't want to be there.
Yeah.
Like, why are you here?
An energy vacuum is
that for me is the number one thing. You have to be enthusiastic, because I think if you're enthusiastic and you're willing to try, you will succeed in life. Because sometimes the people who aren't the best designers end up being the best designers, because they're the ones who keep trying at it and keep being enthusiastic. Yeah. Sometimes there's people that are amazing designers, very naturally talented, but a bit lazy. So I think enthusiasm for me is the number one.
Yeah. When we look at student portfolios, we're looking for creative ideas when we go through it. They understand the creative process, and they can come up with interesting and witty ideas. So you've got to kind of have that in your repertoire, that you understand what you're doing, and you can build that into an idea as such. But as Jen says, you also need enthusiasm. You want people who are humble, who will come into a studio and want to learn about lots of different things and help on different things. Because as time goes on, it's not necessarily that you become less humble. I think that building that kind of way of working into your career throughout means that even when you're 20 years down the line, you might be an executive creative director somewhere earning a nice salary. But if you can still be willing to help people and to have enthusiasm and work hard, then you're leading from the front. So actually just building that from the beginning of your career, to just be humble, enthusiastic, and then try and develop your design and creative ability as you go along, you'll be fine. You'll do well.
Yep, right. Thank you.
Just a couple of things on the chat bar, which kind of tie in, I suppose. Has COVID changed the way that you work, and also getting internships or placements, are design agencies starting to look again at that after a bit of a hiatus, obviously because of COVID? So I'm just wondering what your thoughts on that were.
Yeah, I'll take this because you're sort of freelancing at the moment. Yeah. So yes, COVID has changed the way we work. I personally think that it's changed it forever. I think that we're obviously all working from home at the moment. I think that we will go back to the studio as and when we can. But I do think that being a designer is going to become a little bit more of a flexible job. I think we will be going back to the studio, but I can't imagine that we'll all be sat at our desks between 9 and 6, 7, whatever, every single day. I think it'll be a little bit more fluid, and it'll be a bit more of a creative space hub kind of thing. So I do think that's changed things. But having said that, there is a real importance of being in the studio, not just for collaboration and designing and stuff, but also for mentorship. So for you guys, I think it's super important that when you do get a placement or when you do start a job somewhere, that you've got people there with you most days teaching you and mentoring you. So I know at B&B we totally stopped placements because we don't feel like we can offer that mentorship the way that we're working at the moment. I just don't think it's the same. And I think the whole real reason why we have placements in is so that we can, get people in and them have a really good experience and us really mentor them and they learn something from it. So we will be doing placements again, probably once we're back in the studio. And then it'll probably be a case of the person who's on placement, I imagine from B&B's point of view anyway, will be in every day. And there'll always be somebody in the studio, but it might be that there's different people on different days, that sort of thing. But there'll always be people there teaching you. And I know from my point of view, because I organise them, it would probably always be myself or one of the other ladies that I sort it out with that would be there to make sure, you have some continuity. So I do think things will starting back up. I'm hoping in the next few months. And hopefully then it will start getting back to normal. But yeah, it's definitely changed the way I work. And I know it has for most of my mates who work at other agencies.
Yep.
Andy, you still got your hand up, are you?
Oh, no, sorry. I think it's fantastic really great start to Jennie and Mike.
Brilliant.
Absolutely fantastic start to the week. Thank you very much.
Who's on this afternoon, Andy?
We've got 1 o'clock. We've got illustration talk, which is
Becky Chilcott.
Yeah, and then at 3 o'clock, from New York, and hopefully we can have a look at the Empire State Building, which might from Claire Parker at Design Bridge. 3 o'clock, so people can log on to that about 15 minutes early because we will start at 3. So that's kind of 9 o'clock, I think, something like 9 o'clock in the morning, New York time.
Time, yeah.
Awesome.
Great. I'm looking forward to hearing everyone else.
Yeah, we'll be tuning in.
Yeah, we will.
Asking awkward questions.
I think it's fantastic.
Like Andy says, guys, that was brilliant, and that was the perfect way to start the week. So it totally appreciated. And I think massive round of applause. Let's try another team's round of applause.